got a progression of brands. Our main line of beers, the Saranac line of beers, we've produced quite a few varieties back in 1985. First variety was called the 1888 lager. It's now today known as our Adirondack lager. You can kind of see our design progression. Quite famous, our advertising toys and point of sale items throughout the years. The most famous being the Schultz and Dooley series of steins there. We still produce steins today. The reason why we have this room is because we do want to familiarize folks with the basic ingredients in beer, which there are four, being water, yeast, malted barley, and hops. The first variety, 2-row barley malt, used in a lot of lighter beers. Next on display, this is a bit of a left turn, we have flaked oats. Technically it's an adjunct, which means it falls outside of the four basic ingredients. This is used in a lot of stouts and porters, and more recently in New England IPAs. Adding this to a grain bill adds to the essential haze in that style. Caramel malt on display, used in a lot of lagers and Marzen beers like our Oktoberfest. Here we have chocolate malt. It's well roasted barley malt used in darker beers, like for example our Black Forest, our Bavarian style Schwarz beer. And then behind us, of course, easily the most recognizable ingredient in beer, hops. We have a few varieties there on display. Hops give beer that essential bitterness on the back end, oftentimes showcased best in an IPA, an Indian Pale Ale, which is a very hop-forward variety of beer. This is our 7-story brew house. This is where the brewing process begins. The first step in the process is something called mashing in. It's where we take all the appropriate varieties of grain for whatever beer we're producing, combine them, stir it up, cook it up, until we're left with a porridge-like substance called mash. Now the next thing we do with the mash is we push it through this very large filter right in front of us here, appropriately called the mash filter. Filter out all the excess grain until we're left with a sweet, sugar-laden liquid called wort, W-O-R-T. It's important to note that it does contain a lot of sugar, or any of that sugar from which making alcohol from later during fermentation. One of our primary fermentation cells. What happens at this point in the process is we bring the wort down from the brew house, we bring it into a holding tank. The next step is we add yeast. The yeast eats away at the sugars within the wort, producing carbon dioxide and alcohol. What you should take away from this little point of the talk is there are two basic forms of yeast, because there are two basic forms of beer, being an ale and a lager. Each variety you see after that is simply a subset of either one. What we do is bring the beer from over here, bring it into a holding tank, and then we force carbonate. We just add CO2 directly into the beer. You'll notice at the side of the tank it says capacity 1020 bbls. There are 31 gallons in one barrel, so if we were to max out these tanks, they'd hold well over 31,000 gallons of beer. Also, as we pass by these tanks, we do have some notations on the side that obviously indicate what's in there. One of my favorite ones to point out, XPL. This is the internal designation for Utica Club. So if you walk by and you see XPL on a tank, you'll know there's a lot of use in it. Oh, absolutely. That is the 1888 lager. That was the sort of the first foray into craft for us with the Saranac line. Now, I always make the argument that we were really a craft brewery the whole time. I mean, Utica Club had a lot of wonderful varieties, like for example, the UC Bach, which we just brought back on draft briefly. But Saranac was our first dedicated craft line, and that was the first variety we ever made. Well, I think it's something we've always talked about, which they're distinct, but they're drinkable. They aren't too aren't too heavy, they aren't too light. They have this sort of a unique balance that I think few other places can manage. And also too, there's a lot of heritage in what we do. A lot of our recipes are inspired or are even direct sort of facsimiles of older ones. We've been here for over 135 years, so you can almost taste it. Oh, well, we could spend a lot of time on that. But what's great about this place is we employ over 140 people who are, of course, out in the community living their own lives, but also we host a lot of community-oriented events here. We have a lot of community outreach in the sense that we donate to a lot of events. For example, we have a wonderful relationship with the United Way, which is quite active here in Utica. We're high profile and we're philanthropic. We're always quite proud of that. My personal favorite is our Oktoberfest, which luckily we just got out on the pallet out there. So as soon as we're done with this interview, I'm going to load that in and probably load a case of it in my car.
Okay, thank you so much
Absolutely. Thank you so much
for taking me
a tour.
around.
Absolutely, absolutely.